Bernie Madoff will be sentenced for orchestrating Wall Street's biggest investment fraud ever, a Ponzi scheme that swindled thousands of investors out of some $65 billion over 20 years.
You've heard about that, but now we're beginning to learn more about his personal life. People around him, some of whom say they know intimate details about his life, are now coming forward with stories about private diaries, massage parlors, and noontime disappearances. Many secrets, but little evidence of remorse. Here's Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross.
Bernie and Ruth Madoff lived in luxurious splendor. Their $7 million New York penthouse apartment was decorated in the old money style they cultivated, with money that was very new and very stolen. Bernie and Ruth each had their own walk-in closets, their own dens, his with mahogany paneling and nautical art, as seen in these photos obtained by 2020. Life as a crook was very good for very long.
Obviously, he slept at night. He enjoyed himself. He lived a good life. I never could picture him as wanting to hurt innocent people. But clearly he did, and clearly he knew he was doing it.
It was here in the penthouse, when he was still under house arrest, that Madoff learned that 2 of his victims had committed suicide. A French banker, Thierry de la Villechais, slashed his wrists after his clients lost almost $1.5 billion to Madoff. Then, a highly decorated retired British Army officer, William Foxton, shot himself after telling his son he lost his life savings to Madoff.
He'd risked his life time and time and time again in the service of his country, and that money was his only cushion for his retirement.
But Madoff was unmoved and showed not remorse but contempt for the weakness of the victims.
You know, he did not seem like the most contrite person I've ever met.
But did he seem that he was ashamed of what he had done?
You know, I don't think so.
Former New York City Police Department Detective Nick Cassell spent day after day with Madoff this spring, hired to accompany him to court and guard him in his apartment. Cassell told 2020 he saw little emotion in Madoff about anything, even the deaths, reminding Cassell of a serial killer.
Somebody who had stepped back from his inner soul.
In fact, Cassell says the most upsetting thing to Madoff wasn't the people who lost their money, but all the photographers. Madoff left Cassell this phone message about how to solve it.
So if the van, the SUV has black windows on the sides, which I know I see all around the city all the time, it prevents the photographers from getting pictures of me inside the van.
Antisocial personalities are control freaks.
Madoff is a classic antisocial personality, according to former FBI crime profiler Brad Garrett, now an ABC News consultant.
You have no conscience. You have no guilt. You have no feelings about what you're doing to people. You think you are entitled to what you are getting.
Madoff told people after his arrest that he began cheating customers in the 1960s. As the scam grew, however, so did the life of luxury for Bernie and Ruth.
We've seen nothing from her that has publicly expressed any regret, contrition, sympathy for the victims.
No, because I think she's been basically taught and educated by him that, look, we can make money off these saps.
Madoff also made sure to reward his faithful employees with big salaries and big parties. A 3-day shindig at the beach near his summer home in July, with Bernie and Ruth holding court from their beach chairs. And a Christmas where in the early days, at least, former employees said there were topless waitresses and lots of sex and drugs, with Bernie smoking marijuana.
You're standing there, a kid from nowhere, and you're passing a joint to somebody, who's a millionaire,
This former Madoff firm messenger, known in the office as Little Rick, who admits his own drug demons, says he was often dispatched by Madoff to pick up marijuana.
I was a messenger. That was my job most of the time.
What were you thinking? Gee, Bernie Madoff wants me to go pick up this grass?
Go do it. I mean, those days in the 70s, it wasn't like go kill somebody. It was all over the place. It wasn't a big deal.
And where would you deliver the grass?
Yeah, we'd give it to him, or take it to an apartment where they were at. But you didn't pry about it, and you just did it.
That's how Bernie ran his business. He had a high-tech, completely legitimate trading operation on one floor of his office, seen here in 1992 when Madoff appeared on ABC News.
The difference is that 95% of our transactions are running through our technology and are so-called untouched by human hands.
But one floor below, an inner circle of employees operated secretly, producing impressive but bogus monthly statements that fooled clients into thinking they were doing well, when in fact they were being robbed.
There were no terminals. There was no ability to make trades from the 17th floor.
Madoff's brother Peter was in charge of compliance, attesting to the government that the firm was on the up and up.
So his brother is either involved or is going to have to proffer a defense that he was the stupidest man in America.
Through it all, Ruth has been the loyal wife. She has been dutifully visiting him in prison, even though her own sons have cut her off. And many close friends and her own sister were victims of Madoff's crimes.
Some say you were involved in this Ponzi scheme and that you knew about it.
No response to you.
You have no response?
But another woman who loved Bernie Madoff is talking. Eleanor Squillari spent virtually every workday morning for the last 20 years crossing New York Harbor on the Staten Island ferry to Manhattan, where she was Madoff's loyal secretary, used by him, she says, as proof everything was legitimate.
I feel that part of the setup was that Bernie was able to say, and he loved to say that, well, Eleanor's been my secretary, for 20 years. I thought he was a great guy, and part of that person was there.
You told me you loved him, really.
I did. And I still have feelings for him because I haven't reconciled the fact that there was this horrible side to him.
It was the day after Madoff was arrested when she says she realized her boss had lied to her. He called back 20 minutes later from his penthouse apartment, and Eleanor says she soon realized he wasn't sorry. He wasn't apologizing. He was guilty.
And I hung up the phone, and I didn't want to admit it to anyone. I still was in that protective mode. I still was trying to protect him, and I started to realize that this is what he did.
The man you'd worked for so many years.
Was a horrible person.
It must have been very hard.
It was sickening. It was heartbreaking, and then I started to get angry. I started to get really angry.
Eleanor Squillari was a woman betrayed. She first sold her story to Vanity Fair magazine, but her real revenge was to go through every document and file she could find in Madoff's office and desk, make copies, and turn them over to the FBI and to 2020.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I was doing it.
And you've shown us just stacks of documents.
Right.
Including Bernie Madoff's Little Black Book, a $415 Hermes leather personal address diary, revealing people he considered his vital contacts.
If somebody was in that address book, it was somebody that Bernie needed to reach or kept in contact with.
Among the 147 names in the Little Black Book are some of Madoff's biggest victims and key employees, Annette Bongiorno and Frank DePascali, both under investigation by the FBI and not talking with reporters. Under the M's, a list of female masseuses, including one, Lena, whose services are described on the internet by other customers as highly sexual and enjoyable.
I did tell Bernie if he loses that book that somebody's going to think he's a pervert.
Some of these numbers come back to escort services.
Oh, I didn't know that. I don't know.
But
I'd like to stay out of that.
Yeah.
Of greatest interest to investigators in the book is the name and direct Washington phone number of an official of the SEC, which oversaw Madoff's operation and somehow failed to detect the scam.
I think anybody who was knowingly involved needs to go to jail.
His former secretary says she still cannot reconcile how her boss could cheat his longtime clients with a smile on his face. She says it will be too painful for her to be in court next Monday when Madoff is sentenced and will face his victims.
When I think about it too much, I get depressed because I don't know. Well, I do know. They're never going to get everything back. And the trust and the gall of it all and the greed, none of this would ever have happened if you didn't have all of these people playing a part, and all from greed. And for what?